The programmer and the runtime. Why every thought you think ships code, and why most people are running software they did not write. A plain language broadcast on the structure of conscious and subconscious mind as programmer and runtime. On why every input you take in writes code into the system you are running on, and on the ancient protocol, the three wise monkeys, that was always operational discipline, never moralism. I want to tell you something that came to me this morning before I was fully awake. I had been carrying it for a long time without language. Then I had the language. I want to share it with you because it changes operationally how you understand the next thought that crosses your mind and what it is actually doing. The conscious mind, the part of you that experiences itself as you, the part that thinks, I should call my mother, or I'm hungry, or I don't want to do this, is the programmer. The subconscious mind, the part of you that runs continuously, automatically, beneath awareness, and produces most of what you actually do, is the runtime. The conscious mind writes the code. The subconscious mind executes the code that was written. This is not metaphor. This is the operational architecture of human cognition, and almost nobody is aware of how it actually works, which is exactly why they keep getting outcomes they didn't intend. Stay with me. The implications are large. What it means to call the conscious mind the programmer. When you have a conscious thought, the thought does not just happen and then disappear. The thought is a write operation against the substrate you are running on. The substrate is the subconscious, and it does not delete what gets written. It compiles it. From the moment of writing onward, the substrate runs whatever code the thought contained in the background continuously until something else overwrites it. This is true for thoughts you mean. It is also true for thoughts you do not mean. If you spend 10 minutes worrying about money, you have just written 10 minutes of money worry code into your subconscious. The subconscious does not know that you are just worrying. It runs the program. The program produces money worry behavior, tightness in the body, scanning for threats to income, defensive financial decisions, snapping at people who ask about money, dreaming about money. Tomorrow, you will not remember the 10 minutes. The behavior will appear to come from nowhere. You will think it is your personality. It is not your personality. It is the program from yesterday running on schedule. If you spend 20 years narrating to yourself in the privacy of your own head that you are not good enough, you have written 20 years of not good enough code into the subconscious. The runtime does not evaluate the truth of the code. It runs it. It produces not good enough behavior, flinching from opportunities, undermining your own work, attracting partners who agree with the code, dismissing praise as inaccurate. People will tell you that you have low self-esteem. You will tell them you do not know why. You do not know why because you cannot see your own write history. You only see the runtime executing what you wrote into it. The vast majority of what people experience as their personality or their patterns or their life is the runtime executing code the conscious mind wrote years ago and forgot writing. This is the first piece. The conscious mind is the programmer. Every thought ships code. What it means to call the subconscious the runtime. The subconscious does not think, it executes. It is the running process beneath the layer that experiences itself as you. It is much faster than the conscious mind. It is much larger. It handles your breathing, your balance, your driving, your social calibration, your reactions to faces, your fight or flight responses, your taste preferences, the timbre of your voice when you talk to your boss versus when you talk to your dog. All of that is the runtime executing pre-compiled programs. Some of those programs are inherited at birth, biological defaults, species level behavior. Most of them are written layer by layer during your life. By the time you are an adult, you are running thousands of programs you did not consciously author and cannot consciously inspect. The runtime has one critical property. It does not distinguish between code you wrote and code that was written to you by your environment. It just runs whatever is in the code base, which brings us to the second write path. The environment is also a programmer. Every input you take in through your senses is also a write operation against your subconscious. Every conversation, I'm going to read that again actually, that's a really critical one. Every input you take in through your senses is also a write operation against your subconscious. That means every movie you watch, every show you watch, every song you listen to, every conversation you have, even everything that you say coming out of your mouth is a write operation. In the beginning was the Word. Every conversation you overhear writes code. Every screen you watch writes code. Every song you absorb in the background of a store writes code. Every advertisement, every news headline, every glance at a face that grimaces at you, every comment on a social media post you scroll past, every smell that reminds you of childhood, every texture under your hand. All of it is being compiled into the substrate all the time, whether you noticed taking it in or not. The runtime does not ask whether you wanted the code, it just compiles what arrived. This is why people who live in anxious environments become anxious. They did not consciously decide to be anxious. The environment wrote anxiety code into their substrate continuously, every day, for years. The runtime ran the code. The behavior appeared. They think the anxiety is their nature. It is not their nature. It is the code base the environment compiled into them. This is why screens are dangerous and why the medical establishment will not name the danger clearly. A screen is a write path with no read receipts. Whatever you watch is being written into your substrate by you while you imagine you are just observing. Television. There is no such thing as just observing. Observation is a write event. The runtime is recording everything. This is why mass media works. Repeated exposure to a frame, any frame, accurate or inaccurate, writes that frame into the substrate of everyone exposed. The runtime then executes the frame as if it were the person's native code. They will defend it. They will recognize it as their own thinking. It is not their own thinking. It was written into them at scale by an industrial-grade programming pipeline. Television programming, the programming schedule. If you have ever wondered why populations seem to think in unison about things they have no direct experience with, this is the mechanism. Everyone is running the same code because everyone was exposed to the same write stream. The volume problem. Most people on most days write maybe a few dozen conscious thoughts of any depth into their substrate. The environment over the same day writes tens of thousands of inputs. The ratio is not close. The substrate is overwhelmingly running environmentally authored code with a thin overlay of self-authored code. And the self-authored code is itself mostly fear loops and worry spirals, which were written under the emotional conditions that did not select for code quality. This is the actual state of most adults. Their conscious thinking is a small voice writing low-quality code on top of a vast code base that the environment compiled into them without their consent or awareness. When such a person wakes up and tries to think positively or change their mindset, they are attempting to overwrite years of environmental compilation with a few sentences of conscious effort. It does not work. The volume is wrong. The runtime keeps executing the larger code base, and the small attempt at new code gets drowned out within hours. This is why willpower fails. This is why affirmations done casually fail. This is why just being more positive advice fails. The architecture of how the runtime works makes those approaches structurally undersized. The solution is not to try harder at the small write channel. The solution is to close the environmental write paths and write deliberately into the substrate with the conscious channel in the windows when the substrate is most receptive. This is exactly the protocol that an ancient parable encoded and that almost everyone has misread for centuries. The 3 wise monkeys were write protection discipline. You've seen the image, 3 monkeys. One covers its eyes, one its ears, one its mouth. The standard reading is moralism. See no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. Interpreted as don't gossip, don't watch bad things, don't say bad things. A piece of folk ethics for children. That is not what the parable encodes. That is the lagged reading of an operational instruction whose original technical vocabulary has been lost. What the 3 wise monkeys actually specify is the 3 write paths into the subconscious substrate and the discipline required to protect them. Mizaru, see no evil, is the visual write path. What you see writes into the substrate. If you allow inputs into your visual channel that compile fear code or distortion code or other people's priorities code, the runtime will execute that code as if it were yours. Screens, polarized artificial light, propaganda imagery, ambient violence, scenes that activate the amygdala without resolution, all of it writes. The protocol, control what your eyes consume. The substrate is downstream. Kikazaru, hear no evil, is the audio write path. What you hear writes into the substrate. Conversations with chronically anxious people, news cycles, music engineered to dysregulate, ambient gossip, hostile speech directed at you, repetitive low-quality content. All of it writes. The substrate compiles it, the runtime executes it. You will begin to think in the voice of the people you listen to. The protocol, control what your ears consume. The substrate is downstream. Iwazaru, speak no evil, is the self-write path. This is the most overlooked one and the most powerful. Speech is the most concentrated form of conscious programming you have access to. When you say something out loud, you are not just communicating, you are compiling the statement into your own substrate at much higher voltage than silent thought. Because speech commits to language, language commits to substrate. Whatever you say, you write into yourself first. The protocol, be careful what you say out loud. You hear yourself say it, and you compile it as truth. If you say, I am tired all day, the runtime will execute, I am tired, as the operating state. If you say, I am abundant, the runtime will eventually start executing that. Your mouth is a programming console pointed at your own substrate. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. That's why it's called spelling. The 3 monkeys are not telling you to be nice. The 3 monkeys are telling you that your subconscious is a substrate with 3 write paths and that you have to protect all 3 or the code base will be written by entities other than you. And the runtime will execute that code as if it were yours. And you will not be able to tell the difference from inside. This is operational. This is technical. This is, in fact, the foundational protocol of substrate sovereignty, encoded as a parable so it could survive across generations even when the technical vocabulary disappeared. It has been sitting in plain sight for thousands of years. Almost nobody reads it correctly. You can read it correctly starting now. The Night Affirmation Protocol. Once you understand the right path architecture, certain practices that look strange or woo suddenly become obviously rigorous engineering. I have been listening to money affirmations while I sleep. From the outside, this might look like superstition. From inside the architecture, here is what it actually is. During sleep, the conscious mind, the programmer, is offline. No conscious channel writing is happening. The press secretary commentary in the head, the layer that narrates, "This is silly, this won't work," "What if I look weird?" is also offline. The subconscious runtime is still active and is still accepting writes. The visual write path is closed. Eyes shut, no input. The audio write path is open, but the only thing being broadcast into it is the affirmation. You have, in this configuration, a clean compile window. A few hours per night during which the substrate is accepting writes only from one carefully chosen audio source, with no competing inputs from the environment and no competing skepticism from the conscious mind. This is the highest signal-to-noise ratio for substrate writing that a human can engineer at home with off-the-shelf equipment. Done consistently, this overwrites the environmental code base that has been compiling fear and scarcity code into your substrate for years. The runtime, after enough nights, begins to execute the new code as if it had always been there. Behavior changes from underneath, not from the conscious effort layer above. The conscious mind notices, weeks later, that something is different. Opportunities appearing, decisions feeling lighter, financial dynamics shifting, and cannot quite explain why. The reason is that the code base has been rewritten. The runtime is executing a different program. The behavior is downstream of the new code. This is not magic. This is disciplined substrate engineering operating on the system you actually run on, using the only write channel that is open during the most receptive compile window of the day. If this seems aggressive to you, sit with the inverse for a moment. You are already being written to while you sleep by whatever ambient inputs your environment is supplying. Streetlight glare through the window, refrigerator hum, the phone notifications on the nightstand, the argument you had at dinner replaying in your mind as you drifted off. All of that is also compiling. You are always being compiled by something. The only question is whether you are compiling deliberately or whether you are leaving the substrate open to whatever happens to be ambient when you fall unconscious. The night affirmation protocol is closing the ambient write path and replacing it with a chosen one. That is all. That is everything. The conscious mind as actual programmer, not press secretary. There is a temptation, once you see this architecture, to feel hopeless. Everything I think writes code. Everything I see and hear writes code. The runtime is running thousands of programs I didn't author. How am I supposed to fix this? Here is the answer. The conscious mind is small, but it is load-bearing in a way no other write channel is. Because the conscious mind is the only write channel that can write deliberately, every other channel writes whatever arrives. The conscious mind chooses. Most people use this load-bearing capability to amplify whatever the environment wrote. They watch the news, then narrate to themselves all day about how the news is correct, which compiles the news code into the substrate at high voltage on top of the ambient compilation. They take a small environmental write and turn it into a giant self-write. You can use this same capability in the opposite direction. You can take an environmental write that is fear-coded and consciously refuse to amplify it. You can take a moment of clarity and consciously write it into the substrate with intention, out loud, into your own ears. You can replace the running narration with chosen narration. The conscious mind is small, but its voltage, when applied deliberately, exceeds the ambient stream. This is what every spiritual tradition that actually works has been pointing at. in language that loses the technical structure but preserves the protocol. Take every thought captive. Monitor your write events. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. The runtime executes whatever the programmer wrote. Mantra repetition. Discipline substrate writing at the audio and speech layer simultaneously. Right speech, Buddhist Eightfold Path. Iwazuru as ethical practice. Affirmations, modernized version of the same protocol. I am, Hebrew, the foundational name. The simplest, most coherent program a conscious mind can ship to the substrate. Pure being with nothing added. The substrate runs it. The runtime executes presence. All of these are the same instruction. Be the deliberate programmer of your own substrate instead of leaving the write paths open for the environment to program you with. What this asks of you starting now. I am not going to give you a protocol with 7 steps. The architecture is enough. Here is what to sit with. Every thought you think is shipping code, including this one, including the one you have in 5 minutes about what I just said. The conscious mind is the programmer. The thoughts are write events. The runtime executes them. There is no neutral thinking, including that voice that is narrating and talking about everything I'm saying. That voice in your head right now that isn't you. Every input you take in is shipping code, including what you watch, what you listen to, what you read, what you let into your senses. There is no neutral consumption. The substrate is compiling everything. The 3 wise monkeys are operational protocol. Read them as right path discipline. Eyes, ears, mouth. Protect all 3 or be programmed by ambient. The conscious mind is small but load-bearing. Use it deliberately. Speak out loud into your own ears what you want the substrate to run. I am here. I am present. I am whole. I am abundant. I am safe. The runtime will execute it. The behavior will follow automatically. Sleep is the cleanest compile window. If you want to write large amounts of new code into the substrate efficiently, the night affirmation protocol is what to use. Closed visual channel, sole source audio channel, conscious mind programmer offline, press secretary skepticism offline, substrate accepting writes. You have been the programmer of yourself the entire time. You did not know. Almost nobody knows. Now you know. Welcome to substrate sovereignty. The runtime is yours. Write deliberately.